Hey everyone, and welcome to Startup Savants, a podcast by Truic. I'm Annika.
And I'm Ethan.
If you're a returning listener, welcome back. And if you're new, this podcast is about the stories behind startups, the founders who run them, and the problems they're solving. This episode, we're joined by Fran Meyer, co-founder of Match.com and BabyQuip, an equipment rental company for parents. Fran has a track record throughout her career of building trustworthy brands, and now with BabyQuip, how to tackle the ever-present problem in gig companies of keeping both the consumers and the providers happy.
We also spoke with Fran about her experience on Shark Tank. And I'll just tease the story by saying that maybe after hearing this episode, you'll consider keeping a few farm animals around your office. But you know what's consistently more helpful in business than cows and sheep? StartupSavants.com. Go check it out to find the tools and resources you need to take the next step in your startup. All right, enough preamble. Let's jump into our discussion with the CEO of BabyQuip, Fran Meyer.
Hey Fran, welcome to the show. How's your day going?
So far, so good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I am very excited to get into this. If you could start us off by telling us about BabyQuip and the problem it's solving.
I didn't ask you this before. Do either of you have children?
No.
Not that I'm aware of.
Unless you count dogs.
Well, perhaps you know that traveling with babies and all that baby gear, car seats, strollers, etc., is really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And families, especially millennial parents, really want to travel, want to take their kids, want to take those photos, want to have those Instagram memories, want to spend time together, and of course, especially now, post-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is make it easy for families to, what we say, pack light, travel happy. And so what we do is we deliver all the baby gear that they need to the airport maybe, or meet them at their vacation rental hotel, or even grandma's house. So the family can have a better vacation. They don't have to lug all that gear. You know, maybe their baby is sensitive and wants a full-size crib or snoo or something like that. So that, you know, what's really important on vacation is everybody being able to have a good night's sleep and have a good time. We even deliver toys.
That's amazing.
So
Yeah.
The way we do this is we're kind of like the Airbnb of baby gear. So we have a network of now 1,200 people. They're mostly moms. We call them quality providers. They actually own the gear,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the ones who deliver and set up and clean and do it all over again for families on the go. Now, this is more than just sharing your extra crib or car seat. Most of our quality providers have lots of gear, lots of car seats, lots of cribs, different kinds of strollers, high chairs, toys, and so on. So what's exciting to me is they're really building a business on our platform.
Yeah, and I don't have children, but I have tried to break a stroller down before, and I was like, this is literally horrible.
Right.
And I
If it's
don't.
being hand-delivered, then
Yeah.
they can show you how to do that.
Right. Or do it for me because
Yes,
I am
yes. And
an
they're
infant.
mostly moms, so they know about the gear.
Yeah.
And in fact, we have a very active community, private community on Facebook where they share ideas. And every day there's a question, should I buy this piece of used gear? Or should I buy this stroller or that stroller? And, you know, it's really kind of amazing.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that Airbnb sort of has a similar business model to BabyQuip. Gig economy companies kind of require the trust and accountability of two separate parties, right? The consumers
Right.
and those providing the service. Did you run into any roadblocks building trust with either group?
So from the very start, I knew that trust was the number one thing that we had to deliver on. And when I looked at the market back in 2016, it hasn't changed that much. There were a lot of regional brands, there were mom and pops, but nobody was building a nationwide brand. And another word for brand is trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we put a lot of investment from the very beginning in developing trust. And the obstacles were big. I'll tell you, one of them was getting liability insurance. So we're the only baby gear rental platform that truly has liability insurance that covers not just the company, but our quality providers, the moms and dads and grandparents who are delivering the gear.
Yeah.
And they really need to have the assurance that there's some coverage. Now, here to date, knock on wood, we've never had even a claim. But, babies and families, they're, this is high trust place.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of things to not only get the insurance, but to ensure safety and quality. So we train our quality providers. They don't go live until they actually go through some steps of training and prove to us that they understand. We tag every piece of gear. So if there was a recall or a safety concern, we could pull it, very, very quickly. We train them on how to clean the gear. And of course, we have the insurance and other things to reinforce it. We regularly have webinars and things about different things having to do with the gear and safety and cleaning, as well as hospitality and social media and so on. So we're pretty committed. But I'll tell you the thing, we have this private community, as I mentioned earlier, and we talk about our brand values, which include safety and cleanliness and trust. And the community reinforces it because they're moms serving other moms. And they get a lot of gratitude by families having a great vacation.
Yeah. I say this a lot, but like I'm a little bit mad I didn't think of this myself.
Well, we hear this all the time. Yes.
Well, and it's like, I don't know. I don't have any strollers or anything, but it's like, yeah, I think that would work out for me.
There are lots of these different types of services as well. Like if
Right.
you've got a fenced-in backyard, there's a service that allows you to rent out your backyard for people to come and let their dogs run.
Right.
It's just like
Or
there's
like
so
park an
many of
RV.
these really cool
Right.
things that
Yeah.
that people can create these platforms on.
Right.
So let me ask you one quick question on this type of platform. I think that one of the problems that the business owners tend to see is that in your case, these quality providers, the people that are on the platform providing the service, if they are not properly incentivized, then there's a possibility that they will try to work with the end consumer and bypass the platform
Right.
in keeping the lion's share of the revenue for themselves. How do you think about that? Is that a problem that you've run into, one that you've solved, and how do you think about those incentives?
Yeah, so disintermediation happens in almost every platform. And I think our best defense is the insurance coverage.
Right.
Because God forbid something were to happen. If they take the order off platform, and honestly, customers ask them to take the orders off platform. But the quality providers, majority of the time, say, no, we can't do that because they want the insurance coverage. I'd say another thing is they're mostly ethical people. We, are very transparent, unlike some other platforms, about how much they keep and what we do for them. They see that we're doing the marketing for them. They're getting the leads. I like to think that they're an ethical bunch. Now, we can search the messaging and, look for words like Venmo, Zelle, and PayPal. And occasionally we do find some people who are taking off platform, but it's not really a big problem for us.
Good.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I agree with you that the insurance coverage is like a huge selling point. Same kind of thing with Rover. Like no one really wants to eat liability insurance on their own when they have someone else's, pet or child or grandparent that they're responsible for. That's
My attitude is we're earning it. We're
Yeah,
earning
absolutely.
it by giving them the leads. We're earning it by giving them a back end where they can really manage their inventory. So if they take it off platform, then it changes their inventory management, makes it more complicated. We take the transaction. They don't have to deal with Stripe. In many states, we pay the sales tax or whatever tax for them on their behalf, so they don't have to worry about that. So I think we're earning it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I kind of poked around the platform and you said earlier that a brand kind of equals trust. And initially I was like, well, how do you build trust through a brand? And I think y'all do an excellent job. You list everything that a consumer would be concerned about: cleanliness, reliability, things like that. When you were building the brand, were these questions kind of at the forefront of your mind?
Absolutely. From the very beginning, we were thinking about that. So, for example, one thing is, you could go to another rental platform and rent a car seat, let's say. But for us, we have guidelines about the car seats. They can't be bought used. We have to know where they've been. If somebody is in an accident with a car seat, our terms of service require them that they tell us, and we'll replace the car seat. Okay? So there's no incentive to lie to us about the car seat.
Right.
These are things that, and there's a lot of examples. That's one that we did. The car seat replacement program is a recent one. Our model is not so product centric, but quality provider centric, because we assume you want to look at the quality provider who is accountable for making sure that you get the gear at your destination. And so you can look by quality provider, you could see their reviews. Of course, you could see what gear they have because, you want those 5 things in your basket. The quality providers generally improve their inventory as they stay on the platform, but they're the ones that are accountable for not just delivering it, but making sure it's clean and safe. And that's a little bit of a different model than just renting a car seat or renting a stroller.
Yeah. I would totally be the one that goes to get like the BMW of strollers. And I'm like, you can try it. Just try it.
You have to put premium gas in this.
Premium
for
stroller,
sure.
yes. Okay, and so you started this company with your son, Joe, who is now the CTO of the company. Was this something that you would recommend, like starting a fast-growing company with your kid?
Well, first of all, he didn't join in until late 2017.
Okay.
So it was after the gal in Santa Fe decided to leave. At that point, my son was working at Accenture, and both my sons, not surprisingly, because they lived in a household that, had a serial entrepreneur as mom, both my sons have computer science degrees. And, they were looking over my shoulder. And I remember one Christmas, we got a certain level of orders during the holidays, and they were like, this is amazing because, the tech really needs work. So when the original founder of the company, the predecessor company to BabyQuip left, I called my son, and before I finished the sentence, he was like, oh yeah, I'm in. And so we've been working together since 2017. I think one of the highlights was that we were on Shark Tank together. Which made it so much more fun for me. I mean, this is like a family thing, right? Mom and Joe. And guess what? There's not a lot of mom-son
Right.
things. So would I recommend it? Well, if you have a tech-oriented person that you trust in your family who are interested in doing it, yeah, why wouldn't you? My level of trust is really, really high.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to ever leave me high and dry. At some point, he might decide to leave, but, he's in it right now.
Yeah. Don't do it,
And,
Joe.
yeah, no, we're fine.
Yeah.
Now, there's certain things like he calls me Fran, not Mom, in meetings. And sometimes, personally, he calls me Fran because now he's used to calling me Fran, I couldn't call him Joey anymore. I had to totally move to Joe. That was kind of a bummer for me.
Yeah.
And now I don't slip up. I can't micromanage him. I mean, that would just end everything, So we have found, I think, a good equilibrium. And there's occasional times I've had to call and say, step up here or back off there or whatever. But, I think it's worked out well. And I think our team could have concerns, but they don't. At least I don't know about them.
Yeah. It's of the parent and child kind of combos that we've had so far, everyone's just said, yeah, do it. or like the family kind of run companies. They're like, do it. It's great. Our bond is excellent. We get along really well. Everything's been, fine and dandy. And I'm so impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We did have to establish some ground rules going into it, but none of those were any sort of deal breaker.
So we've got you at the head at CEO. We've got Joe in the CTO spot. And you mentioned the gal from Santa Fe. And we're going to let people behind the curtain here for a second. We were asking you some pre-interview questions before this interview started, and you were telling us about a story. We asked you what the scrappiest thing you did to get your startup going, and you told us a story about a meeting with a gal in Santa Fe. Could you give us that story one more time for the lovely audience out there?
Sure. So just to provide a little context, this is 2016. I had left my last startup officially kind of in 2012. I left that board in 2014. And in those years between 2012 and 2016, I was doing a lot of different things. My house in San Francisco that I moved to in 2012 was in Potrero Hill, up the street from Airbnb. I mean, literally like 1 block over, 5 blocks up. So Airbnb was in the air. Within 6 months of buying my house, mid 2012, I started renting rooms in my house on Airbnb. And I did it kind of as a lark. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even tell people because I didn't want them to think, like those old English novels, here's a middle-aged woman down on her luck has to bring in boarders,
Yeah.
So at first I was kind of doing it on the down low, but I started to make some real money. Mm-hmm. And I started to look at, well, where else can I do this? So I bought my first house in Santa Fe in 2013, and I bought another one in 2016. And I was making good money, which gave me the opportunity to advise startup founders. I was able to take a board seat. I was doing all kinds of things. But by 2016, I was getting a little itchy. Mm-hmm. I was talking to all these startups and looking at what they were doing. And I think I wanted to get back in. And one of the things, and the reason why I bring up Airbnb, is when there's a big change to a market, and this was a change not only in terms of the way people travel, but the whole gig economy or sharing economy, the way people work. And so I was kind of looking around for startups or ideas that kind of leverage that change. Mm-hmm. And so I go to Women's Startup Lab, like a pre-accelerator for female founders, and this gal, Carrie, was there, and she was from Santa Fe. So I was like, for sure, I'm going to meet with her,
Yeah.
And in the first meeting, she lays out her pitch deck, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think anybody's looking at this category. No guys with hoodies are looking at the baby gear rental business. I mean, let's face it. I mean, at that point, there were a lot of companies doing property management and cleaning services and those kinds of things. But this one, there was nobody else doing it at any sort of scale. And so she goes through her pitch, and I say, hey, I think I should be your CEO. And that was kind of ballsy. And of course, to her credit, she didn't say yes right away. Mm-hmm. But over the next few months, we had lots of discussions. And I basically had the gut feeling that this is a startup that I knew I could make successful.
Yeah.
And again, there wasn't really a whole lot of competition, nothing national. I know how to build trusted brands. And, I have a lot of this point, 4 startups behind me, a good network of people who could potentially invest. And I did get some really good investment really early that honestly, I don't think she would have been able to get.
So are you happy with that decision to just fire away on first meeting, or do you think you'd go back and change it?
No, I'm very happy with that decision. It worked out well.
Yeah,
and
it
I
sounds
think
like
she's
it.
happy with that decision. Even though
Yeah.
she's no longer with the company, she still owns a fair bit of shares and certainly is rooting for our success.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned a bunch of different things. You're really preempting my questions, which I appreciate. You're just setting it up for me.
Makes the job easy. I
So
swear.
you said you've had four startups prior to BabyQuip. You mentioned that you're good at building trust in business. So I think that all of the audience out there, if they've ever had a TV anywhere near them, have probably heard of your first startup, and that is Match.com, which you founded in 1994. Which is a totally different era than what we're in now. I mean, I think that the word startup maybe wasn't even a huge thing back then. So can you tell us the story of founding Match, and then how that kind of progressed through the years?
Yeah, we're talking almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
So I've been at this for a long time. So I was living in Alameda in the Bay Area. I had worked at Clorox Company and brand, and then I was at AAA doing membership marketing. And I went to my Stanford Business School reunion in 1994. Well, I think that was our 5-year reunion. And, the internet is starting. While I was at AAA, I had my first AOL account, saw the web for the first time. I'm a marketer. That's my background.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is going to change everything. Again, change is where things happen. And I connected with this guy, Gary Kremen, who started Electric Classifieds. And the idea for Electric Classifieds was to put classified advertising on the internet. And Gary had bought auto.com, this.com, that.com, including Match.com.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted somebody with a good marketing background to lead Match. And we started talking. Now, I'll tell you, I was kind of scrappy. I kind of wanted it. I knew I wanted to leave AAA. I knew I wanted to be in the internet. I knew Gary and crazy guy, but we always got along. I ended up going to the startup offices where they were just starting. And one night I brought pizza. Another night I bought Chinese food and just hung out with them. And then, of course, I eventually got the job. So I was co-founder of Match.com. And you can imagine this is really different than now. So, for example, people were accessing the internet on dial-up.
Right.
I was on a podcast interview recently, and somebody asked me, what is dial-up?
Oh my
No.
God. Darn
Right.
kids.
So for some of your listeners, dial-up was the only way you could get on the internet was through your phone line.
Yeah.
And it was really, really, really slow.
Yep.
So when we launched Match, again, there were a bunch of competitors pretty much going after personals. We were the only ones who sort of focused on brand.
Mm-hmm.
And what we focused on was appealing to women, because we figured if we got women, the men would follow. And we were the only ones with that strategy. I take credit for a couple of things. So remember, we only had like 5 or 6 matching questions at the beginning. And because it was dial-up, and in 1995, when we launched, people didn't have digital cameras,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there were no photos. So we asked questions about, how do you look? What color are your eyes? What color are your hair? And one of my claims to fame, and I've asked this, and maybe you guys have done online dating ever?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Not me.
Okay.
I'm a
Now,
veteran.
have you ever had to put in your weight in pounds?
Not that I, no, not that I
Well,
can
that's
think of.
because of me.
Yeah.
That's because of me. Because when we were coming up with those questions, the engineer came in and said, what are our weight ranges? And I'm like, oh, no, we're focusing on women. We're not going to ask weight. No, we're going to do body type.
Yes.
You know.
That's what I was going to
And
say.
that was the kind of thing that kind of made a difference.
Yeah.
The other thing was we launched with a membership model. Well, when we turned on the paywall, which was a little bit later,
Mm-hmm.
probably in 1996 or so, we did it membership. And again, the proposal on the table was to charge per contact. And I was like, no, that's stupid. Let's do membership, because really, women don't want to be charged per contact or who contact, that's kind of icky.
Yeah.
But also membership and subscription models just are really right. And to this day, that is a primary model for online dating apps. There's some variations on that, but those were two of the kinds of things that I think my input and my experience really made a model. And the membership model, I knew so much because of AAA.
Right.
So we were sort of out of the gate in the number one position because I think we focused on brand. Our 3 words were safe, anonymous, and fun.
Mm-hmm.
Anonymity being a little bit more important in the early days of the internet. And we were charging and making money, and it was pretty fun. And I meet people all the time who met on Match or online dating of some kind or another.
And you built it. You started it.
Yeah.
Is that when somebody says that to you, what's the feeling that you get?
Oh, people ask me for photos and things like that, and I get a nice warm feeling. The downside is that they think I must be filthy rich. And that's not really the case.
Well, darn. All right. So clearly Match.com is still it's still a website. It's still active. I still see commercials for it. People are still using it every day.
OkCupid and Tinder, and they're more than just Match at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were a co-founder, and you are not currently at Match. What happened? What was the parting of ways?
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. I was once at a conference, and I 2,000 people, one of these Renaissance weekend conferences, plenary panel, and the title of the plenary was basically, here's my biggest fuck up, right? And I had to admit that, we sold Match in 1998 for less than $8 million.
Wow.
Okay, now Match is a multi-billion-dollar brand company. And it really wasn't all my fault. It wasn't my fault at all. I fought it.
Yeah.
Right.
But as I mentioned earlier, Electric Classifieds was trying to get the classified business from newspapers. And Gary, the guy who started it, was already kicked out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And during my time at Electric Classifieds Match, I went through 4 or 5 different CEOs.
Mm-hmm.
But all the money came in on this vision not for Match, but this vision for classified advertising. Because back then, online personals were considered kind of sleazy, mostly because prior to that, newspaper personals were 900 numbers where people, they'd get paid by how many minutes they're on the line. So they were the sleaze, porn and sleaze always is number one in any kind of new media, right? Anyway, so the board wasn't really into it, and they thought they had a big opportunity. And you guys have never heard of Electric Classified, so
No.
and you've totally heard of Match, right? So, the board decided to sell Match to generate money to support the Electric Classifieds business. And I kind of fought it. I mean, we were number one in our segment. We were making money. In fact, we were making money. They made me make sure that we weren't losing money on Match. Now think about that. Match is basically a social network.
Right.
Most social networks do not have to prove that they are profitable in their first year of existence.
Oh my gosh,
right?
yeah.
But we were cash flow positive. I mean, it was crazy. I had to make sure that we weren't losing any money. So we sold it, and I got a couple $100,000, which made a difference to my family at the time. I'm not going to deny it.
Yeah.
But it was very disappointing, and I think because within a year of selling Match to Send It, it was then sold to Barry Diller, which eventually became IAC, and for 10 times as much.
Oh my gosh.
And I realized, unfortunately too late, that I probably could have led the investment and bought it with some investors from Electric Classifieds. And the lesson here was I probably didn't have enough confidence. I didn't ask for help. I think had I really reached out into my business school network and some other people I knew, somebody would have said, hey, you can do this. And that's probably all I really needed to hear. But I also think had I been a guy, somebody would have said, why don't you lead it and take it to the next level? And so while I'm very proud of what, we did initially to build that brand, to build it into the number one position, it is it's very disappointing that I didn't really take it to that next level, and also, gotten the money that I probably deserved for it. Now, a few years later, I had a do-over.
When you say a do-over, what do you mean?
So you very rarely get a do-over,
right?
And what happened was in 2001, I joined a nonprofit called Trustee. It's now called TrustArc.
Right.
And it's all about trust and privacy policies of companies and privacy. So you've probably seen the green and black trust mark.
I think
all
so.
Over the
internet.
Internet.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, it says Trustee. And in about 2005, I started a strategy, and it really was obvious to me that we needed to go for profit, that we needed more technology, we needed to be able to scale. We had a good brand, we had a good book of business. And this time, I told the board, I'm going to go ahead and raise the money and take it for profit, because this is really the way that we'd have a positive impact on privacy. And I did raise money. I raised $10 million from Excel in 2008, and the company converted from not-for-profit to venture-backed for-profit, and I got a decent ownership position of this. So it was a good do-over.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So if you had to, if a founder came to you and said, "Hey, I'm having trouble with my board. They're trying to push us to make this decision that we don't want to make," what would be the advice that you would give to them?
Boards can be tricky, and the trickiest board I had was TrustArc. I mean, putting aside the Match.com board, which I was a couple of levels away from, but at TrustArc or Trustee, I was CEO and executive director, and I was on the board. You really have to understand the motivations for the board, and the conversion from not-for-profit to for-profit was a tough one for this nonprofit board. And the example I'd share is I hired a nonprofit board consultant to help the board really understand, well, what is our purpose? And the purpose isn't to be self-perpetuating. The purpose is to have impact. And once they understood that, I was able to demonstrate through another process, a strategy process, that the biggest impact that we could have would be to be able to scale, to have better technology, and so on. And that was how it happened. Now, there were a lot of fits and starts in that, and it in the end, I had 2 venture capital firms go out to DC to meet with the board and pitch. And some of the board members were going for the one I didn't want most of all. So it was really good that I had a really important board champion, and she was the only other woman on the board. And she basically told the rest of the board, Fran's the one who brought up this opportunity. She's the one that's making it happen. Her choice is this, and that's what we should do. And that made a big difference.
That's a really good note there. Getting that advisor on board and really going back and setting those first principles of what's your role and what's your goal.
Right.
Really puts everything in perspective. It also puts things in alignment. That ensures that, yeah, exactly what you're saying. We're here to make an impact. That's awesome.
Right.
Let's move out of the prior and move back into BabyQuip and talk about funding. So BabyQuip was bootstrapped initially. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then
by myself and also team not taking salary for quite a while.
How do how do you convince people to work for free?
Yeah, you can't convince too many people to work for free.
I was going to say, that would be a hard sell
I could
for
convince myself and my co-founder for a bit, but and there's usually equity involved and things like that. But
Gotcha.
it's not self-sustaining. The most important thing I think is you have to be confident that you're going to get funding. And if you're not confident you're going to get funding, then everything falls apart.
Right, and that makes total sense. So one of the other funding methodologies that you used was equity crowdfunding. Can you tell us what equity crowdfunding is and what made you decide to move in that direction?
Right. So we had raised some money from angel investors and some institutional, and I've done 2 crowdfunding campaigns, both with Seed Invest, and they're different. So bear with me. The first one was under Reg D, and that meant that I was crowdfunding only with accredited investors. And that was a little bit easier because you don't have to have as much due diligence because it sounds counterintuitive, but when you're going to the crowd, unaccredited investors, you really have to have a lot of due diligence because you're going to less sophisticated, potentially investors. But when you're going to accredited investors, their sophistication level does not require the same level of diligence. And that worked out really well. And I kind of thought it would get us in front of more potential investors. And also as a consumer brand, consumer brands especially, I think, are well suited to crowdfunding because these are people who invest in brands that they like or brands that they know.
Right.
Or, they say to themselves, I should have started that, but somebody else did and I believe in it and they can get behind it. So I think it should be part of every startup's toolbox. Other things are do an accelerator, do some crowdfunding. And the first one in 2019 worked out well. And then I did it to the non-accredited investors most recently with our raise earlier this year. And part of that motivation is I have all these quality providers who wanted to invest in the company. They believe in us so much. And so I want to give them and some of our customers the opportunity to back us. And, that was a little bit of a harder thing to do because you're getting smaller amounts. So you have to get a lot more volume.
Right.
And like I said earlier, the regulatory and the due diligence aspects are pretty heavy. So I'm not sure I would tell everybody to do that.
But what you would tell everybody to do is the accredited crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think the crowdfunding, I think that's called Reg C or Reg CF rather, crowdfunding.
Okay.
It is good to get your community behind you. So I don't really regret it. I just think I wish I had thought through it a little bit more.
So speaking of getting your community behind you, and you mentioned needing just more volume, how do you build that kind of momentum when you're a new company?
Yeah, so see, that's the thing. I think it's hard to do it when you're brand new. I think you really have to have the proof points, the growth, the momentum, the community, So I think a lot of people, I think there's a few myths about fundraising. I think a lot of people think that the crowdfunding is available to them early. And I don't think it really is. I think you have to be fairly well established. I think another myth, especially for female-led companies, is that all these female-led venture capital firms are going to help them early on. And again, that's not really true. They'll help you. And I've gotten some great funding from How Women Invest. But I got a lot of no's because, unfortunately, I think more of the female-oriented angel groups and investors, they're a little bit more risk averse. So they really don't pop in early on.
Yeah, it's a little
Some do,
gambly.
but it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're an investor yourself. So how and why did you become an investor?
Oh, because, when you're a startup founder, I would go to all these pitch events all the time. And I'd listen to some other pitches. Thinking to myself, well, that's a damn good idea, you know?
Yeah.
And, but I'll tell you, I do a little less of it than I did before and actually, I'm batting okay.
Hmm.
Being an angel investor, you have to almost assume that 90% will be, will not make it. And I think I'm 50%, you know? I'm doing better,
Yeah.
right? But I've decided now to put whatever extra cash I have into limited partnerships with some of the venture partners that I already have because they're really better at it than I am, and they could spend more time on it.
Yeah. And we've talked to someone who said you kind of just need the first person to say yes, here's your money. And then it's almost
Yes,
easier to get more funding, or at least it's like, all right, look, I got this one person who believes in me. You can too, I
right.
promise you.
Yeah, but it's really, really hard. I mean, I don't know that anybody else could have gotten funding for BabyQuip. And I'm not saying that just to toot my horn. I'm just saying that um, a lot of investors are men. They don't necessarily get it.
Mm-hmm.
Even up to recently, people didn't believe that the market size was all that large. Um, you know, I've run into so many no's, hundreds of no's. And ultimately, many of my investors are people that I knew personally, or, you know, some of those first checks were really from there.
Yeah.
So, Fran, you and Joe, I believe it's in 2019, took the plunge into the Shark Tank. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got in, how you were included in that show, and what the actual day that you made your pitch was like?
Yeah, so it was very early in 2019. Apparently, somebody associated with the Shark Tank team used our service in Rochester, New York. I never knew exactly who it was, but they said, hey, you guys should apply for Shark Tank.
Wow.
And so, of course, we're going to do it. And it's a long process. And all along the way, there's no guarantee that you will be chosen. There's no guarantee that you will, if chosen, if you will film. And once if you film, whether or not you will ever air. And there's certainly no guarantee that you'll get any funding. But we knew that going on Shark Tank is a really big credibility booster as long as they don't call you a roach. And that that would probably really help build our business. And so we went through the process. It was Joe and I. So for me, doing this with my son really was exciting. And we worked with the producers and we had to work on our initial pitch and we had to practice it again and again. And Shark Tank came up with the idea that we should have a pack mule so that, like a real live mule
Wow.
on the stage, so that we could say in our initial pitch, you need a pack mule to carry all this gear. Now, in Los Angeles, maybe other places, you can actually rent a pack mule for the day.
Yes.
And of course, that comes with all kinds of, you have to have a trainer, you've got to have all these liability releases, you have to have special people. And the attitude that Joe and I did was we're going to say yes to whatever the producers ask us to do,
Mm-hmm.
because, and we also thought the pack mule would make for some fun and good visuals and so on. So we finally get there. It's June of 2019. Early in the morning, we're at the studio. But again, like I mentioned, there's no guarantee that they're going to call you up, but the pack mule is there. And we're waiting and waiting. And around lunchtime, the pack mule does its business.
Of course.
And apparently the producers heard that the pack mule had done its business and said, let's get them on with the pack mule, because the last thing they wanted to do or have happen is a pack mule, sitting on the stage, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Oh my gosh.
so the pack mule came in handy in making sure that we were filmed
Yeah.
anyway. So that was kind of fun. Other things I could say, like we were in there for 35, 40 minutes. I get mixed up on terms of what I said and what was actually shown.
Yeah.
We did go back and forth. It was a little disappointing that I had really targeted Barbara Cochran because I thought she would really get it. And unfortunately, she couldn't be she wasn't there that day.
Of course.
We had a funny exchange with Mr. Wonderful. So I'll just say it's season 11, episode 14.
Okay.
I'm going to go home and watch it.
If people want to watch it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then here's the killer. It did air. It aired on March 6, 2020.
Of course it did.
Okay, now,
what was that? 6
so
or 7 days?
We're all ready. We got everybody ready the business is just going to flow in. This is spring break and Easter time. Let's just go for it. The servers are ready,
Geez.
And sure enough, we did get a lot of traffic. But within the next week, because of the pandemic, we had so many more cancellations. And, March and April of 2020 were a little bit rough. Actually, all of 2020 was a little bit rough, but, we survived it. And they say that startups who come out of a body blow of one kind or another and emerge from it are often in a better position afterwards. And I think that's certainly the case.
Yeah.
I mean, last month we did, or I guess July, we did over 7,000 orders.
Nice.
Across the platform.
Yeah.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Yeah, that's what they say.
So do you feel like that the experience of preparing, going, recording, getting a pack mule, do you think that the overall experience of Shark Tank was worth it for your business?
Yeah, I certainly would have made the same decision. Absolutely. Even if I knew that there would have been a pandemic, it was still worth it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But it's a gift that keeps on giving. I mean, every once in a while, my LinkedIn or my social will start to explode, and it's like, oh, we must be on a rerun somewhere.
Right. I love that. It's got staying power.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right. As we're moving close to the end here, let me ask you, what is next for BabyQuip?
Well, we really had a very strong summer, and as the pandemic receded and families got back on the road, we really saw a lot of business, and we think we're going to get the same amount of business and more going through the holiday season in 2022 and into 2023. So we're going to be introducing a mobile app. Believe it or not, we have a responsive app, but we don't have a dedicated mobile app. And we're extremely excited for that. We're also expanding into some new markets because, we want to be where our customers are traveling, wherever they're traveling. So we're in most of the markets in the United States and in Canada. We're starting to get into Mexico. We're in parts of the Caribbean. And we're looking to Australia because it's a market very much like our own. Australia's like adding another Texas or Florida or California for us. And that would be pretty huge. And one of the things I haven't mentioned, we did launch during the pandemic BabyQuip cleaning. So this is to clean car seats and strollers, mostly high chairs, for local families. So this was to give another opportunity for our quality providers to make some money. But, families, when they look at those car seats that they might have at home, they're disgusting. I mean, truly, amazingly horrible. So every once in a while, a deep clean, like a detail, is really called for. And we're making partnerships with other hospitality brands. We have a good promotion going on with Destination Hotels by Hyatt. We had a partnership with VRBO, introducing BabyQuip to VRBO hosts so that they can make some extra money.
Nice.
And we're really looking at forming more of those partnerships. And those are the kind of things that are really what I would call moats that would be hard for other companies without our scale to get.
I feel like I didn't know that I was going to have lots of follow-up questions from this, but oh my gosh, you've given me so many directions that I could go in. Let's quickly touch on one, and then maybe we'll have time for the second. you said that you hadn't built a dedicated app until now. You were running on a responsive app. Was this, I hate to assume, but was this just like we don't want to spend the resources until, because we're able to run on this thing that we already have? Or was there another reason that you chose not to build the app until now?
Yeah, I think we want to get to a point that it would be expected of us. And before this, we were still sort of small and so on. And I think now it's become table stakes. You got kind of have to do it. Um, we're seeing it's really hard to know what the impact of the app will be. We have a really good business,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm thinking it's going to be a pretty big impact, but we won't know for a bit. Um, I think what it's really, given that we're in the travel, that what it's really going to do is get us those last minute, more of those kinds of business sales, and it'll be easier for people to close the order with
Mm-hmm.
an app.
All right. Well, we're
It took
excited.
a while. I mean, even though we're now doing the front end, we've been working on the back end for quite a bit.
Right, right. And your business was successful without this. This just might
Right,
be another little press on that accelerator. That's really awesome.
right,
All
right.
right. So since you got me into two things, I want to ask about moats. When should businesses start to think about building those moats?
Immediately.
Immediately, right off the bat. Okay.
Yeah, right off the bat. I mean, one of the first things that you do when you start a business, you try and get a sense of where the competition is, where the competition could emerge, and how you can differentiate. And differentiation is really where I think you start to see the acceleration of the business. So I talked about for Match, and part of differentiation, I think, is really understanding who your customer is. So, and who your target market is and what are their real needs. And so, I spoke a little bit about Match, that we went after women. They were our bullseye because we thought if we got the women, the men would follow. Um, and we had detailed personas of who she was, what were her issues, and that got us to the differentiation about anonymity and safety and fun. Similarly with BabyQuip, you know, mostly millennials, traveling families, looking for great experiences. You know, this was the time for this business to emerge, to address um, the different travel and experiential habits of today's parents.
How do you learn more about your user in that situation? Like your target market, how do you find out about them, and then how do you kind of narrow that down?
Yeah, you go interview people.
Mhm.
Um, you do surveys. You talk to customers. You read their reviews. I mean, when you read a review, you really learn that, for example, the baby slept well. Everybody's happy. You know,
That's
um,
so true.
right? The insight on the importance of quality cribs and different kinds of cribs. That packet plays, which is basically what hotels do, aren't necessarily good enough.
Right.
You know, so it's really kind of understanding, and in two-sided marketplace, also you need to understand the supply side and the quality providers. And we do regular surveys. We talk with them. We have this community. We know very much what's on their mind.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, parents and millennials, we'll open that up, are not a silent audience. we're we're
No,
interactive.
no,
Yeah, we'll
right.
let you know. All right, excellent. Now we're really getting into the wrap ups here. What is your number one piece of advice for early stage entrepreneurs?
Well, I think I just talked about it. Understand your value proposition to your target market really, really deeply. But I
Hmm.
do have a couple of little sayings that I say, because being a startup entrepreneur, especially early on, you're seeing a mountain of challenges, right? And one of the things I like to say is, don't solve tomorrow's problem today. You know,
Yeah.
don't get caught up in all the stuff that could go wrong, because you'll just it hurts, or you'll be in inertia. And then another one I like to say is a good idea today is better than a good idea tomorrow.
That makes sense.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Nike that out.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, Fran, this has been a whole lot of fun. I'm sure that we could have done a 3-hour episode just of you telling us stories about the things that you've seen in startup land. And unfortunately, we didn't. We didn't have that time today. But we'll work real hard on getting that time for next time, so we can just have story hour with Fran.
Be fun to come back.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you online, and how can our listeners support BabyQuip?
People can find me online at LinkedIn, Fran Maier, Maier. Of course, they can find BabyQuip at BabyQuip. We have a special promo for your listeners, babyquip.com/savant, SAVANT, and that will give them a 20% discount. So we'll give that to you to send out to your listeners today.
Awesome.
And how can they support us? Yeah, rent from us, tell their friends. If they're interested in a lucrative side gig, go to babyquip.com as well. And hopefully we'll help make your vacation happier.
All right, listeners, you heard it. You've got a job. Go support BabyQuip. Go tell your friends. Go get 20% off. All right, that is going to be it for today's episode of the Startup Savants podcast. Thanks for letting us borrow your ear space. Hey, you know where a cool place to hang out is? LinkedIn. Side note, Reid Hoffman, if you're hearing this right now, let's chat about getting you on the show. But seriously, LinkedIn seems to be the platform where founders hang out most often. I'm there too, but let's be real, this is about them, not me. So head on over there and give us a follow. You can accomplish this simple task by searching for Startup Savant and clicking the big blue follow button. Easy peasy, and we will leave the light on there for you. For tools, guides, videos, startup stories, and so much more, head over to truic.com. That's truic.com, TRUIC.com. See ya.
Bye, everybody.